Some roads tell you something before you see what's on them. Not the dirt. The silence. The way the birds go quiet. The way a horse's ears move before the eyes have anything to follow. Scout had been reading roads for years. He read this one at a quarter mile, and he stopped. Texas. Spring of 1889. 3 miles from home. She was walking. Not the walk of someone who had chosen to walk. The walk of someone who had been walking for a long time and had reduced the act to its minimum. The economy of a body that has made peace with the distance and is simply covering it. 72. White hair beneath a simple cloth bonnet. Dark travel clothes worn at the elbows. Shoes that had not been made for this road or this distance. A cloth bag held against her chest with both hands. Not swinging. Held. The way you hold something that cannot be replaced. 2 riders behind her. Not close, 100 yards back. The pace of men who were not in a hurry because the woman ahead of them had nowhere to go, and they knew it. Scout stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The complete cessation of forward movement that Scout produced when Scout had decided and was not going to be argued with. The stranger felt it. Catherine felt it. They looked at the old woman, at the 2 riders, at Scout's ears, fully forward, locked, the position that meant the horse had already finished the calculation that the humans were still beginning. The stranger looked at the 2 riders, at the dark coat on the left, at the gray hat on the right. Something in his expression changed. Not surprise, recognition. He had seen both before. That morning, 12 miles north, at Vane's operation. Catherine saw him recognize them. "You know them," she said, not a question. "Vane's men, 2 of the 6 from this morning." She looked at the old woman, at the cloth bag, at the 100 yards of road between the 2 riders and the woman who had been walking for a long time. "Scout?" she said quietly. The horse did not move. The horse was already home. Her name was Nora Hayes. She told them this standing in the road with the cloth bag against her chest, her voice steady, the voice of a woman who had lived 72 years and understood that steadiness was the thing you kept when everything else had been taken. "They took my horse," she said, "at the creek crossing, 2 hours ago. The horse and the saddlebag with my money and my food." She looked at the cloth bag in her hands. "They didn't take this." "What's in it?" Catherine said, not unkindly, directly. The voice of a woman who understood that the bag was the point. Nora looked at the bag for a moment. The look of someone deciding how much to say. Then she opened it. Inside, a portrait. A photograph, worn at the edges, the kind that was expensive to make in 1889, and that people kept in cloth bags against their chests rather than in saddlebags, because saddlebags could be taken. A young man, 23 or 24, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that looked directly at the camera with the directness of someone who was not accustomed to being photographed, and was not going to look away just because the situation was unfamiliar. "My son," Nora said. "William. He died 3 years ago. Fever." She held the portrait carefully. "I'm taking it to his boy, my grandson James. He's 9. He lives with a neighbor family east of Comanche since William died." She looked at the portrait. He's never seen his father's face. He was too young when William died to remember. The road was very quiet. Catherine looked at the portrait, at Nora, at the specific weight of a woman who had been walking for 2 hours in shoes not made for this road, carrying the one thing she had that the 2 riders behind her had not taken, because she had kept it against her chest, and not in the saddlebag. Let me stop here for a second, because I need to say something before we go any further. When I was writing this story, when I got to Nora walking alone on that road with that cloth bag against her chest, I stopped typing. Because I've seen that before. My grandmother used to travel a long way to visit us, not 12 miles, much further. And she always arrived with something. Nothing expensive, nothing that seemed important at the time. A small jar of something she made herself, a piece of cloth she thought I might like, something wrapped carefully, the way you wrap things when you know the journey is long and what you're carrying matters more than what it looks like. I was a child. I didn't understand. I put those things down somewhere and forgot about them. Now I keep everything she ever brought me. Every single thing. Because I understand now what those trips cost her. What it means to travel far carrying something small and careful. For someone who doesn't fully understand yet what they're receiving. Nora understood. My grandmother understood. Maybe someone in your life understood that too. Some things don't require analysis. They just require stopping before it's too late to pay attention. And here's something about traveling alone in Texas in 1889 that most people don't think about. Because the roads look empty in the history books. And they weren't. Women traveling alone were a regular feature of the frontier West. Not because it was safe, it wasn't. Because the work required it. Widows delivering inheritances, grandmothers carrying things to grandchildren, women running errands that had to be done regardless of whether there was someone to do them with. The assumption that women needed escorts to travel was a middle-class Eastern idea that the Texas of 1889 could not afford. Nora Hayes had probably ridden and walked roads like this one her entire life. What was unusual about that Tuesday afternoon was not that she was alone. It was that two men on horses had decided that alone meant vulnerable. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about what was 3 miles up the road. "Stay with her," the stranger said to Catherine. He turned Scout, rode toward the two riders at a walk, not fast, the deliberate pace of someone who wanted to be seen coming and wanted the two men to have time to understand what was coming before it arrived. The left rider reached for his weapon first. One shot. The left rider's horse came back riderless. The right rider was still reaching when he understood that reaching was not going to be the right decision. His hand stopped. His face did the arithmetic of a man who has just watched the fastest thing he has ever seen happen to the person beside him. "Don't," the stranger said. The right rider's hand came away from his belt. The stranger rode to him, looked at him from Scout. The man was 25 at most, the build of someone who had been doing rough work for rough people since he was old enough to be useful, and had not yet accumulated enough experience to develop the judgment that would have told him this particular road on this particular afternoon was not the right choice. "Vane sent you south," the stranger said. "Vane didn't send us specifically. We were heading south when we saw the woman. Just an old woman on a road alone." "Just an old woman." The man said nothing. "I told Vane this morning that the next men he sent south don't get to ride back." He looked at the man steadily. "I'm making an exception today. Once." He leaned forward slightly on Scout. "Ride north. Tell Vane what happened here. Tell him the road south is closed, not suggested. Closed. And tell him the man who closed it is still 3 miles south and has had a long day and would not welcome a third conversation." The man looked at his companion's riderless horse, at the stranger, at the two colts. He rode north, fast. The stranger watched him go. Then he rode back to Catherine and Nora. Catherine was looking at him. Nora was looking at him with a different expression. The expression of someone who recognized something. Not him, specifically. The thing that certain people carry. The thing that had no name, but that 72 years of living had taught her to recognize when she saw it. "Thank you," she said. The specific thank you of someone who means it completely and is not going to add anything to it because anything added would make it smaller. He nodded. "How far is your grandson?" he said. 12 miles east, a farm outside Comanche." He looked at Catherine. Catherine looked at Nora. "You're not walking 12 miles, Catherine said, the tone that did not invite discussion. The wounded man reached Vane's operation at 4 in the afternoon. Vane listened with the focused attention of a man who processed information professionally and without sentiment. The creek crossing, the old woman, 2 riders, 1 shot. The stranger on the road with the 2 colts. Vane looked at the man, at the road south, at the deed he had signed that morning, the property adjacent to the North 40, transferred because the calculation had not worked. He had made his assessment. The Aldred Ranch had cost more than it was worth, and would continue to cost more than it was worth. The alien land law was coming. The window was closing. There were other ranches, other roads, other calculations. "Go to the doctor," Vane said, "and don't go south again." The man went to the doctor. Vane went inside. He poured a glass, sat at his desk, looked at the south road through the window for a long moment. Then he looked at his ledger, turned the page, found the next entry. A professional understood when a line of business had closed. Vane understood. He turned the page. For 40 minutes, the south road remained empty. Then Cord arrived. Cord, who had spent the day in Thomas Aldred's barn and had been released when the stranger and Catherine left for Vane's operation, who had been riding since noon, who had found Bridle on the road and heard everything, the barn, the yard, the 1 revolver, Scout through the gate. Cord looked at Vane's operation, at the wounded man outside the doctor's building, at Vane's window. He had been a professional for 20 years. He had been put in a barn, twice, by the same man. Professionals who have been put in barns twice by the same man develop something that overrides professional judgment. It is not anger, precisely. It is the specific refusal of a man who has built his entire identity around never being the one who loses, encountering, for the first time, the undeniable fact that he has lost. He walked to Vane's door, knocked. Vane opened it, looked at Cord, at the expression on his face. "Don't," Vane said. The tone of a man who has already made his calculation and does not want to have to defend it. "The barn," Cord said. "The barn was a mistake. The calculation changed. We move on." "You move on," Cord said. "I have a different calculation." Vane looked at him, at the 4 men behind him, Bridle, Wes, Dutch, the men from the porch, the men from the barn, the men who had raised their hands in a yard while a horse stood in the center and watched. "This will cost you more than the barn," Vane said. "I know," Cord said. Vane looked at him for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the door, closed it. A professional knew when a decision had already been made. Cord rode south with 4 men. Vane went back to his desk, opened the ledger to the page he had turned, and began a new entry. He was done with the Aldred land. Whatever happened south of Comanche that night was Cord's business, not his. They rode east, Nora on Catherine's horse, Catherine riding behind the stranger on Scout, her arms around him, the cloth bag with the portrait safe in Nora's hands. The Texas spring afternoon around them. Nora rode the way old women who have ridden their whole lives ride, without ceremony, without performance. The easy competence of someone who has been doing this since before either of the other 2 were born, and has no intention of making a production of it. She talked while they rode, not continuously, in pieces, with silences between that weren't uncomfortable, the silences of someone who has been quiet for a long time and finds themselves unexpectedly in company and is calibrating how much of the quiet to fill and how much to leave. William had come to Texas in 1878 from Tennessee. With his wife Margaret and $40 and the specific stubbornness of a 23-year-old who had looked at Tennessee and decided it was not enough, and had looked at Texas and decided it might be. He had been right. Not immediately. The first 2 years had been the kind of hard that tests whether the stubbornness is the real thing or the performance of it. But the ranch had grown. The cattle had increased. The water rights on the East Fork had been the piece that made everything else possible. His wife, Margaret, had died in childbirth in 1880. The boy had lived. William had raised James alone, which Nora describes not as a hardship, but as the thing that had revealed who William was. Not the ranch, not the cattle. The raising of a child alone in a territory where there was always too much to do and never enough hours. He was a good father, Nora said. Better than most men would have been. Better than he knew he was. How did he die? Catherine said. The question of someone who needed to know the whole shape of the thing. Fever. Spring of 1886. The same spring the blizzards were killing cattle on the northern range. Nora looked at the road ahead. Bad spring all around. She paused. He was 31 years old. The road was quiet. Scout moved east. The Texas spring light going amber in the afternoon. The farm outside Comanche was exactly what Nora had described. Small, maintained with the care of people who worked hard and wasted nothing. Not because they couldn't afford to, but because waste was simply not who they were. A woman named May opened the door, looked at Nora, at the stranger and Catherine behind her on horses, at the cloth bag, at Nora's face, which said everything that needed to be said about what the cloth bag contained and why she was here. Nora? May said. Her voice the voice of someone who has been expecting a visit and is not entirely sure she is ready for what it means. Is James here? Nora said. He's in the yard. May steps back from the door. Come inside, all of you. James was in the yard behind the house. 9 years old, dark hair, William's hair, Nora had said. And looking at the boy, the resemblance to the portrait was immediate and specific. The build of a child who had been doing farm work since he was old enough to be useful. Compact, capable, with eyes that were older than 9 years should produce. The eyes of a child who has lost something large and has kept moving anyway, because moving is what you do. He looked up when Nora came through the back door. Gran? The single word that children use for the people they are completely certain of. James, she said. She walked to him, knelt down. The specific difficulty of a 72-year-old woman kneeling that she performed without comment, without hesitation, because the moment required it, and the body's objections were not relevant. She opened the cloth bag, took out the portrait, held it in front of him with both hands. Her hands were not shaking. This is your father, she said. His name was William Hayes. He was born in Tennessee in 1855, and he came to Texas because he believed there was something here worth building. She paused. He was right about that. He built a good ranch, and he raised you alone after your mother died, and he loved you more than anything he had ever loved in his life. He told me that, more than once. She looked at the portrait and then at the boy. I want you to know what he looked like. James looked at the portrait, at the face of a man of 23 in a photograph that was 16 years old. He looked at it for a long time. The yard was very quiet. Catherine at the back door did not move. The stranger behind her did not move. May stood with her hand over her mouth. James looked up from the portrait, at Nora. "He looks like me," he said. "He does," Nora said. "He always did. From the day you were born. He used to say," her voice caught just once, the single catch of someone who has been holding something for 3 years and has just carefully set it down. "He used to say that looking at you was the best thing he had ever done." James put his arms around Nora. She held him, the portrait between them. They stayed, not because they planned to, because May asked them with the quiet directness of a woman who understood that supper was the correct response to what had just happened in her yard, and that the people at her table had earned it. They ate. Afterward, James sat beside Nora on the porch steps, and she told him about his father. Not the large things, the portrait things, but the small ones. The stories that photographs don't contain, and that only the people who were there can carry. The way William laughed, too loud, always. The laugh of someone who found things genuinely funny and didn't see any reason to be quiet about it. The mule in Tennessee, an argument that lasted 3 days and that William lost comprehensively, and that Nora had been telling for 40 years and had not lost a single detail of. The way he had proposed to Margaret, with a speech rehearsed for a week that he abandoned completely at the moment and said instead simply, "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you," because the rehearsed version had seemed insufficient for what he meant. James laughed at the mule story before Nora reached the end of it. The laugh of a boy who knows a story well enough to anticipate it and laughs anyway, because some stories earn the laugh every time. The stranger sat on the porch steps below them, Catherine beside him, her shoulder against his arm. Scout at the fence rail, not facing north, not facing south, simply present. The horse that had stopped on a road 3 miles from home and had not been wrong about any of it. The Texas spring night came in around them, stars appearing one by one over the Comanche County farmland. May's husband, Garrett, a man of few words who expressed his feelings primarily through building fires at appropriate moments, had built a fire in the yard. Its light crossed the porch and the faces of the people sitting around it. The stranger looked at the fire, at James and Nora, at Catherine beside him, at Scout at the rail. At some point, Catherine put her head against his shoulder. He did not move. The fire crackled. The night was warm. The stars were very bright over the Texas spring. And then Scout's ears went forward. They came at midnight. 4 horses in the dark. No torches, no voices. The specific darkness of men who understood that light and sound announced them, and that surprise was the instrument they needed. Scout heard them first, the ears going forward at the fence rail, the same ears that had gone forward on a road 3 miles from home and had not been wrong. The stranger was already awake. The habit of 20 years of roads, the body that slept light and woke complete, not gradually, not confused, but present and oriented within the first second. He was at the window when the first shape appeared at the farm gate. Cord, the dark coat, the deliberate walk of a professional who had covered ground at night before and knew how to do it quietly. Behind him, Bridle, Wes, Dutch, spread across the approach with the positioning of men who had done this kind of work and understood the geometry of it. 4 men. The stranger looked at the window, at the yard, at the gate, at Catherine, awake beside him, the rifle already in her hands, the expression of a woman who had been sleeping light and had heard Scout's ears before she heard anything else. 4, he said quietly. I see them. Cord is the one who matters. I know which one Cord is. He looked at her. She was already moving to the window on the left side, the angle that covered the gate approach and the yard corner simultaneously. The angle she had identified before supper, because Catherine always identified the angles before supper. He took the 2 Colts, went to the door. Behind him, a sound from the back of the house. He turned. Nora was in the hallway, fully dressed, holding May's cast-iron pan with both hands. He looked at her. She looked back with the expression of a woman who had lived 72 years and had not survived them by staying in her room when things happened outside of it. "I'm not going back to bed," she said. He looked at the pan, at Nora. "The kitchen," he said. "Back window. Nobody comes through the back without going through the kitchen." Nora looked at the kitchen, at the back window, at the pan. "Understood," she said, and went to the kitchen. What this night required from everyone around it, I've been thinking about how to say this. The stranger with 2 Colts, Catherine with her sight lines identified before supper, and Nora Hayes with a cast-iron pan that had come from Tennessee in 1861, and had survived everything between then and midnight on a spring night in 1889. 3 people, 3 positions. The geometry of a night that was going to be decided by whoever had paid attention. They had all paid attention. That's the thing about stopping for someone on a road. It doesn't just help the person you stopped for. It puts you exactly where you need to be for what comes next. Scout stopped 3 miles from home, and because he stopped, these 3 people were in this house, in these positions, at this moment. Some things that look like accidents are not accidents. They are the road doing what roads do when you let a horse decide. Cord reached the porch. He moved the way professionals move in the dark, without hurry, without noise, with the economy of someone who had done this enough times to remove everything unnecessary from the process. He reached the first porch step. The door opened. "I told you not to come south," the stranger said. His voice in the dark of the doorway, the same voice from the canyon in New Mexico, from the hallway at 2 in the morning in Cimarron, from the main street in Elk Crossing. The voice that did not perform anything. The voice that simply stated what was true. Cord stopped, looked at the doorway, at the 2 Colts visible even in the low light. "This isn't about Vane," Cord said. "This is about the barn. I know what it's about." "Then you know I didn't come here to talk." "I know," the stranger said. "Your choice." What Cord chose, and what the 60 seconds after his choice produced, belongs to Thomas Aldred's later account. Thomas said that what happened in 60 seconds on May's porch was consistent with everything he had heard across 22 episodes of Road, and that he had stopped being surprised by any of it approximately 2 years ago. Outside, Cord and Wes and Bridle encountered the geometry of a man with 2 Colts who knew the yard and a woman with a rifle who had been reading the sight lines since supper. Cord went down first, not because he was the closest, because he was the professional, the one who had made the decision that brought them here, and the stranger settled accounts in the order they were owed. Wes and Bridle encountered the geometry next. The geometry produced the result that geometry produces when it has been correctly applied. 3 men down, none of them getting up, and Dutch. Dutch had gone around the back of the house. The approach of a man who understood that the front was covered and that the back was where coverage failed. The back was not where coverage failed. Dutch came toward the kitchen window. He did not expect the kitchen window to be occupied. He did not expect a cast-iron pan. He did not expect Nora Hayes. The pan connected with the side of Dutch's head with the focused application of force that a woman produces when she has walked 12 miles in the wrong shoes and had her horse stolen at a creek crossing and has a grandson asleep in the next room and has arrived at midnight at the absolute end of her patience. Dutch went down. Nora stood over him, the pan still in her hands. The expression of a woman who has just done something that surprised even herself, and has decided that surprise is not the appropriate response. "Stay down," she said. Dutch stayed down. The stranger came through the kitchen door 30 seconds later, looked at Dutch, at Nora, at the pan. Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, close. "Good pan," he said. Nora looked at the pan, at Dutch on the floor. "My mother's," she said. "Tennessee, 1861. She set it on the kitchen table with the care of someone returning a valuable object to its proper place. "It's made 300 miles and 28 years. She looked at Dutch. "I expect it'll make a few more." She went to her room, came back immediately with the cloth bag, checked the portrait. It was undamaged. She sat down at the kitchen table and waited for morning. They built the fire at dawn, not for warmth. The Texas spring didn't require it. For the reason that certain fires are built, because people need to be still and together, and the darkness has just done something that daylight needs to process before anyone can move on from it. Garrett built it without being asked, the way he did most things, without words, with the focused attention of a man who understood what was needed and provided it. James sat beside Nora. He had slept through the night, the deep, complete sleep of a 9-year-old who has had a very large day and whose body has decided that the body's requirements take precedence over everything else. He had woken to the fire and to Nora beside him, and to the specific quality of the morning that follows a night when something has been settled. He had the portrait in his hands. He had not put it down since Nora gave it to him. Nora told stories, the small ones, the ones that portraits don't contain. The mule in Tennessee. James laughed before she reached the end. The proposal. James looked at May when Nora got to the part about, "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you." And May looked at Garrett, and Garrett looked at the fire with the expression of a man who was not going to comment. The way William had learned to ride, badly, stubbornly, with the determination of a boy who would not admit that the horse was managing the situation better than he was. "He sounds like me," James said. "He was exactly like you," Nora said. "In every way that matters." The fire crackled. The Texas spring morning around them, green and unhurried, the light arriving without drama, the birds returning to the yard with the indifference of animals that had waited out the night and were resuming their business. Catherine leaned against the stranger. He put his arm around her. Scout was at the fence rail, not facing north, not facing any particular direction, simply present. The horse that had stopped on a road 3 miles from home because stopping was the right thing to do, and had been right about everything that followed. The fire burned. The morning was warm. James was laughing again. The story about the hat and the river that Nora saved for last because she knew it was the best one, and some things you save for when people are ready. The stranger listened. The way he listened to things that mattered, fully present, not performing attention, understanding that the story was the thing that kept a person alive beyond the date on the record. William Hayes was in that yard that morning, in the laughter, in James's dark hair, in the way the boy held the portrait, careful, with both hands against his chest. The way Nora had held the bag. I don't have a word for what that fire was. I've told a lot of stories on this channel, but this one is different from all of them. A fire at dawn, after a night that required something from everyone around it. I think about my grandmother, the things she carried that I didn't know to ask about, the roads she walked, the stories she told by fires that I was too young to understand were going to matter to me later. I understand now. Too late to tell her, but I understand. Some fires are just warmth. Some fires are everything you couldn't say in the dark. Finally finding the light to say it in. And I want to ask you something. Is there someone like that in your life? Someone who walked roads you never asked about? Someone who carried things you only understand now? Drop it in the comments. Just a name, just a word. I want to know who you're thinking about right now. They left at 9, not quickly, with the unhurried departure of people who have been somewhere that mattered and are not pretending it didn't. Nora walked them to the gate, James beside her. He was holding the portrait, not in the cloth bag, in his hands, against his chest, the way Nora had held the bag. The gesture of someone who has understood what they are carrying and is not going to be careless with it. The stranger mounted Scout. Catherine mounted beside him. They looked at Nora, at James, at the portrait against the boy's chest. "Thank you," Nora said, to both of them. And then she looked at Scout. She walked to the horse, put her hand on Scout's neck, the ease of a woman who had been around horses her entire life and understood them. Scout pressed his head against her hand. The gesture, the confirmation, the physical statement. Nora looked at the horse for a long moment. Then she looked at the stranger. "He stopped on that road," she said, "before you did." "He always does," the stranger said. She nodded. "Go home," she said. "You've earned it." He looked at James. The boy was watching him with the dark eyes, William's eyes, the eyes that had been looking at a portrait all morning and were now looking at the man who had made the morning possible. James raised one hand, the gesture of a child who does not yet have words for everything and uses the body to say what the mouth cannot. The stranger raised one hand back. Then he turned Scout south. Catherine rode beside him. The Texas spring morning around them, green and wide and unhurried, the light golden on the road south, the birds moving through the brush on both sides. At the gate behind them, James, still watching. The portrait against his chest, watching until the two riders were small in the distance, then smaller, then gone. Scout moved south, the easy trot, the road home, 3 miles. Scout's ears relaxed, facing south, the way they always faced when they were going somewhere that mattered. 22 roads, a woman who walked 12 miles with a portrait, a horse that stopped because stopping was right, a cast-iron pan from Tennessee, a boy who looked at his father's face for the first time, and a fire at dawn. Riders. This one is different from all the others. No deed on the line, no courthouse, no 12 men at dawn. Just a road, an old woman, and a horse who knew. Thank you for the comments on the last episode. So many of you said the same thing. They should stop. He did. Scout already knew before anyone asked, and I owe you an apology. This one ran a little long. I got carried away. Nora does that to you. I hope you stayed for all of it. I think it was worth it. If this is your first time on this channel, 21 more stories like this one are waiting for you in the playlist below. Tell me in the comments, what struck you most in this episode? Nora with the pan, James and the portrait, the fire, Scout stopping on the road. Which one? I read them all. And tell me your country. I want to see the map, guys. If this channel gave you something, Nora walked 19 kilometers carrying something that couldn't be replaced. Some things can't be replaced. This channel is one of them. If you want to help keep these roads open, become a member or just leave a like. The button is right below. See you on the next road.